I tell this story now not because I want to remember the fear, but because I need to remember how it felt to stop being afraid. It is a story about a man whose silence was louder than any shout, and a girl who could not see the danger everyone else saw so clearly. It began, as so many endings do, with a desperate hope. It began in a ballroom that smelled of lilies and quiet desperation. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of expensive perfume and the metallic tang of ambition. I could feel the vibrations of the orchestra through the soles of my shoes, a low, thrumming heartbeat against the polished marble floor. It was a sound that was supposed to signify elegance, celebration. To me, it sounded like a clock ticking. My brother, Leo, was dying. It wasn't a sudden, violent thing. It was a slow, methodical erasure. A traitorous heart that beat to a rhythm of its own, a rhythm that was winding down. The doctors had used words like congenital defect and complex cardiomyopathy. I had used words like please and how much. The answer to how much was a number so large it felt like fiction. An experimental surgery, a specialist from another continent, a life-saving machine that cost more per hour than I made a year. A sum that might as well have been the moon. And the man who could grant me the moon, the man who held Leo's life in his perfectly manicured hands, was my fiancé, Dr. Julian Thorne. To the world, he was a saint in a starched white coat, a brilliant cardiac surgeon, a philanthropist. His face was on the cover of magazines, his hands praised as instruments of God. His voice, a carefully modulated baritone, was a balm to anxious families in hospital corridors. I knew his other voice, the one that was sharp and cold, like a shard of glass. The one he used in the quiet of our apartment when he thought no one else could hear. The one that told me I was lucky. The one that reminded me, with chilling precision, of everything I owed him. He was holding this gala, the Thorne Foundation Heart Health Gala, a monument to his own generosity. People paid thousands to eat rubbery chicken and listen to him speak about saving lives, all while my brother's life was a bargaining chip Julian held against me. "You look presentable," Julian had murmured when he'd collected me earlier. His fingers had brushed my arm, a touch that was meant to look affectionate to the doorman, but felt like a brand on my skin. "Remember your role tonight, Ilera. Smile, be grateful, and do not, under any circumstances, cause a scene. Do not cause a scene." It was his favorite refrain. It meant, do not have your own thoughts. Do not have your own feelings. Do not remind the world that you're anything other than a pretty, silent accessory on my arm. A blind girl I so magnanimously took under my wing. My blindness had once been a novelty to him, a challenge. He loved explaining it to his friends, the poetic tragedy of it. He never seemed to understand that I didn't see my world as tragic. It was just my world, a world of sound and scent and texture, a world where I could hear the lie coiled beneath a beautiful word, feel the tension in a hand that was pretending to be gentle, a world where I knew, with absolute certainty, that the monster was not the one with the fearsome reputation, but the one everyone adored. I stood by a pillar, trying to make myself smaller. The pillar was cool and smooth against my back, a small point of reality in the swirling chaos of voices and laughter. Julian had left me here with a curt, mingle, as if I could navigate this sea of sharks on my own. I could hear his sister, Serafina, holding court nearby. Her voice was like her brother's, but lacquered with an extra layer of dismissive cruelty. "Honestly, I don't know what Julian sees in her," she was saying, her voice a stage whisper designed to carry. "She's a charity case. And the blind thing is just morbid. He's a saint, truly, for taking on such a burden." My hand tightened around the thin strap of my clutch. Inside it was a folded, worn piece of paper. The latest bill from the hospital, the one with the red final notice stamped on it. It felt like a block of ice against my palm. Time was up. Leo's doctor had been clear. Days, not weeks. Julian had promised. He had dangled the surgery in front of me for months. "When we are married, Ilera, when you prove your loyalty, when you show me you understand what a gift I am giving you." It was never about money. Julian could have paid for it with the snap of his fingers. It was about power. It was about owning me, owning my gratitude, my future, my very hope. I had to do it. I had to break his rule. I had to cause a scene. I took a deep breath, pushing myself away from the cool, safe pillar. I followed the sound of Julian's voice, the confident, practiced cadence of it as he schmoozed a potential donor. I moved through the crowd, my cane tapping a soft, insistent rhythm on the floor. Top, top, top. A countdown. Julian, my voice was small, but it cut through his anecdote. The small circle of laughter around him died. I could feel the sudden shift in atmosphere, the prickle of curiosity. Alara, darling. His voice was a warning wrapped in velvet. Mr. Henderson was just telling us about his new yacht. The message was clear. These are important people. You are not. I need to speak with you, I insisted, keeping my voice low but firm. We'll talk later. It was a dismissal, a command. No, we need to talk now. I felt his hand on my arm, the grip surprisingly tight, painful. This is not the time or the place. You said that yesterday, I whisper, my voice shaking now. And the day before. Julian, Dr. Evans called. Thou, Alara, the single word was ice. You are embarrassing yourself. He was turning away, dismissing me like a child. The humiliation was a hot flush that spread from my chest up to my neck. The laughter, the whispers, the scent of lilies. It was all suffocating me. Desperation is a wild, cornered thing. It has no pride. It has no logic. I raised my voice, not a shout, but loud enough to carry over the string quartet. You promised. The entire ballroom seemed to fall silent. The only sound was the frantic, useless beat of my own heart. You promised you would save him, I said, the words tearing from my throat. The surgery. You said if I was good, if I was obedient, you would save my brother's life. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. I couldn't see their judgment, but I could feel it. A physical weight. A crushing pressure. Julian let go of my arm. I heard him take a step back. When he spoke, his voice was filled with a pained, theatrical sadness. The voice of a martyr. My dear Alara, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, the cruel, triumphant smile. I think you're confused. You've been under a great deal of strain. He was talking to the audience now, not to me. Her brother's condition is tragic, truly, but it is terminal. There is no surgery. There is no hope. I have tried to make her understand, to accept the inevitable, but her grief, it has made her unstable. The lie was so vast, so complete, it stole the air from my lungs. He wasn't just denying his promise. He was erasing Leo's only chance and painting me as insane in one clean, brutal stroke. That's not true, I gasped. Dr. Ramirez in Switzerland, the procedure. You know it exists. We have emails. Emails. Julian's laugh was soft, pitying. Oh, my poor, darling girl. What fantasies have you constructed? There are no emails. There is no procedure. There is only a sick boy and his sister who cannot face reality. He had it all planned. He knew I couldn't produce the evidence. He had been the one reading his emails to me, describing them. I had never seen them myself. He had woven a cage of his words and my trust, and he had just slammed the door. The crowd murmured. I could hear the sounds of sympathy. For him, the poor man, saddled with this hysterical, delusional creature. Shame was a physical thing. It was a hot, acrid taste in the back of my throat. It was the feeling of my blood turning to ice. I had done the one thing I could do. I had caused a scene, and I had lost. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to escape the sound of his voice, the scent of his victory. My cane was a frantic, clumsy thing, catching on the legs of chairs, the feet of startled guests. I stumbled, caught myself, and kept running. Away from the ballroom, down a hallway where the music faded and the air grew colder. I heard a startled, "Ma'am, you can't go back there," from a staff member, but I ignored it. My hand hit a cool, metal panel. An elevator. I fumbled for the button, jabbing it with my thumb again and again. I just wanted to go down. Away. Anywhere. A soft chime sounded, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. I practically fell inside, turned to press the button for the lobby, for the ground floor for freedom. But the doors didn't close. A man's voice, low and quiet as stone, said one word. Stop. The word wasn't directed at me. It was aimed at something behind me. I heard a sharp intake of breath from the hallway, the scuff of a shoe. The person who had been about to follow me into the elevator had frozen. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy. It was powerful. The elevator was not empty. I froze, my hand hovering over the control panel. I hadn't heard anyone. I hadn't smelled any cologne or heard the rustle of fabric. The presence in the elevator with me was so still, so utterly contained. It was like sharing the space with a statue. Then I smelled it. Not cologne, just the clean, sharp scent of expensive wool, a faint, almost undetectable trace of ozone, and something else. Something cold and metallic like steel. The doors slid shut, encasing us in a sudden, profound quiet. The elevator did not move. My heart was a wild bird beating against the cage of my ribs. I had run from one monster straight into the den of another. This was a private elevator. I had breached some inner sanctum. The voice, calm and lethal, had confirmed it. I kept my back to the wall, my cane held tight in my hand. I tried to still my ragged breathing, try to listen. There was the soft hum of the elevator's ventilation, the whisper of the silk of my dress against the metal wall, and the sound of a man's breathing. It was so slow, so even he might have been asleep. But he was not asleep. I could feel his attention on me. It was as palpable as a touch. A heavy, assessing weight. I was used to being looked at. People stared at the blind girl. But this was different. This was not curiosity. This was scrutiny. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The silence was a weapon, and he was wielding it with terrifying skill. I knew I should say something. Apologize. Plead ignorance. But the words were trapped behind the lump of shame in my throat. Finally, he spoke again. His voice was the same, incredibly quiet, yet filled the small space completely. It was a voice that didn't need to be raised. It was a voice accustomed to absolute obedience. Who made you run? It wasn't the question I expected. Not, who are you? Or what are you doing here? He didn't ask what I was running from. He asked who made me run. The question was so precise, so insightful, it broke through my panic. It saw past my hysterical flight and went straight to the cause. An agent. A person. I swallowed, my throat dry. I am sorry, he stammered. I took a wrong turn. I reached for the door open button. I did not ask for an apology, the voice said. It was still quiet, but there was an edge to it now, like a blade wrapped in velvet. I asked a question. This was a man who did not like to be ignored. I took a shaky breath. I could lie. I could make something up. But I was so tired of lies. And something in his voice, a strange lack of judgment, made me tell a sliver of the truth. My fiancée, I said, the word tasting like poison. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was thinking, processing. I heard a faint rustle of cloth. He had moved. He was closer. My senses screamed, every nerve ending on high alert. I could feel the heat from his body, just a few feet away. The man they call a saint, he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. He had been there. He had heard. My blood ran cold. He had witnessed my humiliation. Dr. Julian Thorne. The voice continued, musingly. He said the name as if he were tasting it and finding it wanting. He has a reputation for saving hearts. It seems he is more proficient at breaking them. There was no pity in his voice. There was something else. A cold, analytical curiosity, and something that sounded almost like recognition. He lied. I whispered, the word for myself more than for him. He lied about everything. People with perfect reputations often have the most to hide, the man observed. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. They spent more time polishing the outside of the cup than cleaning the inside. His strange, detached calm was more unnerving than any anger would have been. He was dissecting the situation, not reacting to it. I felt a tear escape and trace a cold path down my hot cheek. I angrily wiped it away. I would not cry. Not in front of him. Not after crying in front of all of them. Why did you run in here? He asked, his voice shifting slightly. A new question. Another scalpel. I didn't know it was in here, I said. I just pressed a button. You ran without looking. He stated the obvious, but without malice. It was a simple observation. For him, it was probably a fatal flaw. A bitter, broken sound escaped my lips. It was almost a laugh. I never look, I said. I'm blind. The confession hung in the air between us. I always hated saying it. It felt like an excuse, a definition. Most people responded with a clumsy, awkward apology. He did not. The silence stretched. I could feel his gaze on my face, more intense than before. I imagined he was looking at my eyes, which I knew were clouded, useless, seeing the proof. Then he did something that shocked me more than any threat. He moved closer. I flinched, my cane coming up slightly in a pathetic defensive gesture. A hand, large and warm, gently closed around my wrist, the one that was not holding the cane. His touch was firm, steady, not aggressive, just definite. He carefully lowered my arm. His skin was warm. His grip was surprisingly gentle for all its strength. I know, he said, his voice softer now, closer to my ear. I flinched at the proximity. He did not let go. But you are not a fool. You hear things others do not. You feel things others miss. My breath hitched. No one had ever said that. They talked about my other senses being compensated. They talked about it as a deficit. He spoke of it as a skill. Your fiancé's voice, he continued, his thumb brushing lightly over the frantic pulse in my wrist. What does it sound like to you? The question was bizarre, personal, but I answered. It's polished, I said, the words coming slowly. Too polished. Like something that's been rubbed and rubbed until all the real texture is gone. It's smooth on the surface, but underneath it's brittle. It sounds like it could crack at any moment. And mine? He asked. The question was quiet, with no discernible ego attached. It was pure information gathering. I hesitated. What did his voice sound like? It's quiet, I said, but it's heavy, like a stone at the bottom of a deep lake. It doesn't need to move to have weight. He was silent for a long moment, his thumb stilled on my wrist. I thought I had offended him. Then he let go. The warmth vanished, and the air felt cold where his hand had been. The elevator gave a soft lurch and began to descend. He had pushed the button without me hearing him. You have good ears, Alara, he said. My name. He had said my name. A chill that had nothing to do with fear traced its way down my spine. He knew who I was. Of course he did. He had heard Julian use my name. The elevator doors slid open. We were not in the lobby. We were in a stark, concrete parking garage. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. A sleek black car, so silent it must have been electric, was idling just a few feet away. A man in a dark suit stood by the car's rear door. He was huge, a mountain of muscle and stillness. He opened the door as we approached. Where are you taking me? I asked, my voice sharp with renewed alarm. Your brother, the man said, stopping beside the open car door. What is the name of his hospital? My mind reeled. Why? You wish to save him, do you not? He asked, his logic as cold and direct as a surgeon's knife. The man upstairs uses your brother's life as a leash. We're going to remove the leash. Who are you? I finally asked the question that had been screaming in my mind. He paused, turning his head slightly, as if considering the question. I am the man you ran to when you could no longer stand the saint, he said. Get in the car. Tell Marco the name of the hospital. It was not a request. It was a command, spoken with the quiet certainty of a king. I stood frozen on the concrete floor. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and a tiny, treacherous spark of hope. To get in a car with a complete stranger, a man who radiated danger like a furnace radiates heat, was insane. But to go back upstairs? To face Julian again? To go home to my empty apartment and wait for the call that Leo was gone? That was not just insane. It was impossible. I had run from a polished monster. I had no idea what I was running toward, but it was at the very least honest in its danger. St. Jude's, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He's at St. Jude's Children's Hospital. The large man, Marco, nodded once. He did not speak. Get in, the quiet man repeated. He did not touch me this time. He did not need to. His will was a physical force in the small space. I took a hesitant step forward, my cane finding the edge of the car. I slid onto the cool leather of the back seat. The door closed with a solid, definitive thud, sealing me in. The world outside went silent. The car was like a vault. The man slid in beside me. He did not feel close, though the space was confined. He took up his own space, and no more. Marco got into the driver's seat. The car pulled away, silent and smooth. We drove in complete silence. I sat rigid, my hands clenched in my lap. I was trapped. I had made a terrible, reckless choice. The man next to me pulled out a phone. I heard the soft, almost inaudible clicks of him typing. Then he made a call. "It's me," he said into the phone. His voice was even quieter now, if that were possible. "I need a patient moved." "Leo," he paused. "Kovacs," I supplied, my voice tight. "Leo Kovacs. Leo Kovacs. From St. Jude's. I want him transferred to the Alpine Clinic. Tonight." My breath caught. The Alpine Clinic. It wasn't a hospital. It was a legend. A private, state-of-the-art medical facility in the mountains, whispered to be the best in the world. It was where presidents and kings went for secret treatments. Its cost was astronomical. He listened for a moment. "I don't care who you have to wake up. He is to be prepped for transport within the hour. And find Dr. Ilera Ramirez, the specialist from Switzerland. Fly her here, whatever it costs. I want her on the ground in 24 hours. He listened again. "Yes, that one. The experimental procedure. The room is to be ready. My account will cover everything." Everything. He ended the call. Just like that. With a few quiet sentences, he had done the impossible. He had moved mountains. He had purchased the moon. Tears pricked at my eyes again, but these were different. They were not tears of shame or fear. They were tears of a dam breaking, of a pressure that had been building for months suddenly, impossibly released. I started to tremble. A deep, racking shudder that shook my whole body. "He's going to be okay," I whispered. It was a question. It was a prayer. The man beside me was silent for a long time. I thought he wouldn't answer. Then I felt a slight shift in his weight. "I do not buy things that are broken," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I'm not paying for hope. I am paying for a result. Your brother will have the best chance that money, power, and expertise can provide. The rest is up to his own heart." It was the coldest, most terrifyingly reassuring thing anyone had ever said to me. He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering efficiency. A transaction. What? I finally managed to ask. The question that had been burning behind my lips. "Why are you doing this?" He turned his head toward me. I could feel the intensity of his unseen gaze. "Your fiancé made a mistake," he said, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "He thought your brother's life was a tool for control, a piece of leverage." He paused. "I have a distaste for men who use the weak to control the strong." The strong? Did he mean me? The trembling girl who had run, crying from a party. And, he added, his voice so quiet it was almost a thought, "Loyalty like yours, the kind that would make you stand up in a room full of enemies and speak a losing truth that is not a thing to be leveraged. It is a thing to be protected." The car turned, and I could tell from the change in air pressure we were on a highway, picking up speed. We were heading away from the city, towards the mountains, towards the Alpine Clinic, towards Leo. I leaned my head back against the cool leather. For the first time in a year, I felt a flicker of something other than fear. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something more fragile. It was possibility. But as we drove into the night, a new fear began to creep in, cold and sharp. I had traded a leash for a shield. But the shield belonged to this man, this quiet, dangerous stranger who bought miracles like other men bought coffee. And I had no idea what he would ask for in return. Dante Moretti watched the girl in the corner of his eye. He was a man who traded in stillness, who had cultivated an aura of untouchable calm. His empire was built on his ability to see the flaw in the perfect facade, the tremor in the steady hand, the lie in the honest eye. He noticed everything. And he had noticed Ilera Kovacs from the moment she had entered the ballroom on Julian Thorne's arm. He had noticed the way her hand, resting on the surgeon's sleeve, was not relaxed. It was a cage of bone and sinew. He had noticed the way she smiled when spoken to, a perfect, empty curve of her lips that did not reach her clouded eyes. He had noticed she was blind, yes, but he had also noticed that she was listening, truly listening. Her head tilted, her body a finely tuned antenna, absorbing the sound and texture of the room in a way the sighted fools around her never could. He had a file on Julian Thorne. He had a file on everyone of consequence in this city. Thorne was a peacock, arrogant, ambitious, with a carefully constructed public image and whispers of a gambling problem he thought he had hidden. A man with secrets was a man with levers. Dante collected levers. When the girl had made her desperate, suicidal stand, Dante had not been surprised. He had been intrigued. It was a foolish move, a losing move, but it was also magnificent. It was the move of a cornered wolf, not a beaten dog. The raw courage of it was breathtaking. And Thorne's response, it was masterful in its cruelty. The public gaslighting, the weaponization of her grief. Dante had felt a cold, familiar disgust rise in him. It was the same brand of casual cruelty he had seen from his own father, the kind that delighted in breaking things that would not bend. When she ran, he had known, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, where she would end up. His private elevator was in a restricted service corridor, an accident waiting for someone desperate enough to find it. He had let her run. He had wanted to see what she would do. When she stumbled into his elevator, his guards, Marco's men, had started to move. A flicker of motion in the hall. Dante had raised a single finger. Stop. And they had stopped, because they understood. The girl was not a threat. She was something else. Her terror in the elevator had been a palpable thing, a scent of ozone and salt. But it was her answer that had sealed the moment. Her description of the voices. A stone at the bottom of a deep lake. No one had ever described him so accurately. People saw the surface, the stillness, the cold. They did not understand the weight, the pressure, the sheer, immovable density of his will. She had seen him. Without her eyes, she had seen him more clearly than anyone in his entire life. And in that moment, something shifted in the cold, orderly calculus of his world. Julian Thorne had made a grave error. He had taken something precious, the girl's fierce, desperate loyalty, and he had treated it like dirt. He had tried to break it. Dante Moretti did not like it when beautiful, rare things were broken. So he had made a decision. It was not emotional. It was practical. It was a rebalancing of the scales. Thorne had misused a valuable asset. So Dante would take the asset, and he would destroy the man who had abused it. Simple. Now, sitting next to her in the silent, speeding car, he watched her. He saw the trembling stop. He saw her spine straighten. He saw the fight, which had been extinguished by Thorne's cruelty, slowly, cautiously, reignite. She was like a rare bird with a broken wing, wary of the hand that offered aid. He understood. Kindness to a person who has only known conditional affection often feels like the most terrifying trap of all. He would have to be patient. He would have to be careful. He looked out the window at the dark trees flashing by. He had just set in motion a series of events that would utterly ruin Julian Thorne. It would be methodical. It would be absolute. And it would be a pleasure. But that was business. The girl beside him, she was something else entirely. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Dante Moretti was not entirely sure what to do next. Which, he had to admit, was a most interesting feeling. The Alpine Clinic was not a hospital. It was a sanctuary carved into the side of a mountain. The air was thin and clean, smelling of pine and cold stone. The silence was deep and profound. We had arrived in the dead of night. A helicopter had been waiting for Leo at St. Jude's. A helicopter. The sheer, casual power of it left me dizzy. I was shown to a suite of rooms that was larger than my apartment. The floors were heated stone, the walls were pale wood, and one entire wall was a sheet of glass overlooking a valley of sleeping mountains. I could feel the vast, empty space beyond the glass, and it was both terrifying and beautiful. A nurse with a soft voice and gentle hands told me that Leo was stable, that he was being settled in the pediatric cardiac wing, and that Dr. Ramirez's plane had already departed from Zurich. I didn't see the man who had brought me here. After he had walked me to the entrance of the clinic, he had simply said, "Your brother is safe now. Get some rest." Then he had turned and walked back to his silent car, leaving me in the care of his quiet, efficient machine. I didn't sleep. I stood by the great glass wall, listening to the hum of the building and the whisper of the wind outside. I was in a gilded cage, but for the first time, the bars were meant to keep the world out, not to keep me in. Leo was safe. The thought was so new, so fragile, I was almost afraid to touch it, for fear would shatter. But safety came at a price, and I had no idea what the price was. The next morning, after a nurse confirmed that Leo had rested comfortably through the night, I found my way to his room. The clinic was a maze of quiet corridors, but the staff all seemed to know who I was, guiding me with gentle deference. "Mr. Moretti's guest," they would murmur. "Mr. Moretti, Dante Moretti." The name had been whispered to me by the head nurse. She said it with a mixture of awe and fear. A quick search on the tablet provided in my room had filled in the blanks. Dante Moretti was not just a wealthy man. He was a phantom, an untouchable investor who had built an empire from the ashes of his father's more traditional family business. There were rumors of his ruthlessness, his cold precision. They called him the Ghost because he moved without ripple, his influence felt but never seen. He was a man who did not exist in public, yet owned a piece of everything. And I had gotten into his car. I had told him his voice sounded like a stone at the bottom of a lake. The thought made me feel lightheaded. Leo was sleeping when I arrived. His room was also a suite, filled with machines that beeped and whirred in a soft, life-affirming chorus. His face, which had been so pale and drawn, had a touch of color. His breathing, usually a shallow, desperate struggle, was deep and even aided by a small oxygen tube. I reached out and took his hand. It was warm. A wave of gratitude, so powerful it buckled my knees, washed over me. I sank into the chair by his bed, my head bowed over our joined hands, and I finally cried. Not tears of shame or fear or desperation. Tears of relief. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually the door opened. I didn't look up, assuming it was a nurse. It is a good sound. The voice was a low rumble. "Dante Moretti." I straightened up, quickly wiping my cheeks. My face was hot with embarrassment. "The sound of these machines," he clarified, his voice calm. "It is the sound of time being bought." He walked into the room. I listened to his footsteps on the stone floor. Deliberate, unhurried. He stopped, not at the foot of the bed in a position of power, but by the large window several feet away. He was giving me space. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. I don't know how to thank you." "There is no need," he said. "Consider it a correction to a market inefficiency." I turned my head in the direction of his voice. "And what? Your fiancé held an asset, your brother's life, and he failed to utilize it correctly. He used it for a low-yield return, your personal subjugation. A poor investment." He spoke of Leo's life and my freedom as if they were commodities on a stock exchange. It was bizarre. It was chilling. And yet, in a strange way, it was cleaner than Julian's suffocating, emotional blackmail. "And what is the high-yield return?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "What do you get out of this investment?" He was silent for a moment. I heard the soft whisper of his wool coat as he shifted his weight. "I get to watch a man like Julian Thorne, who believes he is a master of the universe, discover that he is, in fact, a very small fish in a very large, very cold pond." There was no pleasure in his voice, just a flat statement of intent. "And me?" I pressed. "What about me?" "You are not part of the transaction," he said. I gave a short, bitter laugh. "I'm sorry, but I find that very hard to believe. Men like you, men like Julian, you don't just give things away. There's always a price. I'm just waiting to find out what it is." "I'm not like Julian," he said, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something hard and dangerous in his tone. The velvet was gone from the blade. "Do not make that mistake." "Then prove it," I challenged, my heart hammering. "What do you want from me?" He walked over from the window. He stopped next to my chair. I could feel the heat of him smell the cold, clean scent of the mountain air on his coat. He was so close. I tilted my head back, as if I could see him. "I want you to sit here, in this chair, and hold your brother's hand," he said, his voice dropping to that unnervingly soft murmur. "I want you to listen to the machines that are keeping him alive. I want you to meet with Dr. Ramirez when she arrives and listen to her explain, in excruciating detail, exactly how she's going to save him." He crouched down, so his face was level with mine. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "And then, I want you to eat a meal. And I want you to sleep in a bed that is not in a hospital. And when the surgery is over, and your brother is safe, and the fear that has been eating you alive for a year is finally gone, I want you to look back on this day and remember what it felt like to be free of Julian Thorne's leash." He paused. "That is the return on my investment," he said. "Your freedom, not your debt." He stood up and walked to the door. "Rest, Elara," he said, and then he was gone. I sat in the silence, my mind reeling. His words were a labyrinth. He offered freedom, but his every action screamed of control. He spoke of transactions, but his gaze, which I could feel on me even now that he was gone, felt intensely personal. He was a man who bought miracles, and he had just told me that I was not the price. I didn't believe him. Not yet. But as I sat there, holding my brother's warm, living hand, I allowed myself to hope that he was telling the truth. The next few days were a blur of suspended reality. Dr. Elara Ramirez arrived, a whirlwind of energy and sharp, accented English. She explained the procedure to me not with condescension, but with the respect of a colleague. She drew diagrams on a tablet that I couldn't see, but she described them with such vivid, tactile language that I could almost feel the path her instruments would take through my brother's tiny, damaged heart. Dante Moretti was an invisible presence. Food would appear. A nurse would mention that Mr. Moretti had arranged for a private car should I wish to take a drive. A new coat, softer and warmer than any I had ever owned, was waiting in my closet because he had noted the mountain air was colder than I was used to. He was providing for me, anticipating my needs with a silent, unnerving prescience. It felt less like kindness and more like a strategic campaign. He was surrounding me, not with threats, but with comfort. It was a far more insidious form of capture. On the third day, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it would be. "Elara," Julian's voice was tight with fury. The polished veneer was gone. This was the real man, the one I knew. "Where are you? Where's Leo?" "He's safe," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Safe? You ran off in the middle of the night. The hospital said he was transferred on a private medical charter. What have you done? Who are you with?" "I'm with someone who is helping," I said simply. He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Helping? Elara, do you have any idea who Dante Moretti is? He's a criminal, a monster. The things his family has done. People who get involved with him disappear. What has he promised you? Whatever it is, it's a lie. He's using you. He's using you to get to me." "To get to you?" I asked, confused. "Why would he care about you?" "Because of the foundation. Because of my reputation. Men like him can't stand men like me, who build things, who heal people. They only know how to destroy." The hypocrisy was so astounding, I was speechless. "Come back, Elara," he said, his voice shifting, becoming pleading. The manipulative Julian was back. "I was wrong. I was under pressure. I love you. We can fix this. I'll call the Swiss doctor myself. I'll pay for everything. Just come away from him. He's dangerous. You told a ballroom full of people that my brother was going to die and that I was delusional," I said, my voice cold. "All to save your own reputation. That sounds pretty dangerous to me." "I had to," he hissed. "You put me in an impossible position." "No, Julian," I said, and the certainty in my own voice surprised me. "You put Leo in an impossible position. You're the one with all the power, and you chose to use it to torture me. This man, this monster, used his power to save my brother's life in a single phone call." I took a breath. "Goodbye, Julian." I hung up before he could reply. My hand was shaking. I had stood up to him, not in a desperate, public plea, but in a quiet, final conversation. The door to my suite opened. I hadn't heard a knock. Dante Moretti stood in the doorway. Marco was a silent shadow behind him. That was Thorn, he stated. Yes. He is beginning to understand the new reality, Dante said with quiet satisfaction. But he is a slow learner. He has started a smear campaign. What do you mean? He and his sister have been talking to the press, to board members. They are painting a picture. A tragic, unstable blind girl, grieving her dying brother, who was seduced away by a predator. A gold digger who left her saintly fiancé for the allure of dark money. I sank onto the edge of the bed. Of course, he couldn't control me with Leo anymore, so he would destroy my character. He would salt the earth so nothing could ever grow for me again. He will not succeed, Dante said. He walked into the room, holding a thin file. He placed it in my hands. It was cool and smooth. What is this? I asked. That is the beginning of Julian Thorne's reality, he said. Financial records from his foundation. He has been skimming, diverting funds meant for research and patient care into an offshore account to cover his gambling debts. I ran my fingers over the crisp paper. I couldn't read it, but I could feel the weight of it, the weight of truth. Marco has also acquired recordings, Dante continued, his voice flat and businesslike. From Thorne's office, from his car, from the last several years. It seems your fiancé likes to talk. He likes to boast. And he is very, very cruel when he thinks no one is listening. My blood went cold. You recorded him. I collect information, Dante corrected. It is the most valuable currency in the world. Thorne has been on my watch list for some time. His appetites were becoming a liability to certain business partners. Your situation merely accelerated the timeline. He had been watching Julian all along. This wasn't about me. Not really. I was just a catalyst. The thought was strangely comforting. It meant I was truly not part of the transaction. What are you going to do with this? I asked, holding the file. Nothing, he said. This is merely for your information, to put your mind at ease. The time for its use has not yet arrived, he paused. The annual Physicians' Benevolence Award ceremony is next week. Thorne is the guest of honor. He let the statement hang in the air. A stage, an audience, a final public scene. He will be expecting to receive an award for his humanitarian work, Dante said, a hint of something that might have been dry humor in his voice. Instead, he will receive an education. He turned to leave. Wait, I said. He stopped. Why are you telling me this? Because, he said, turning back to face me. When the time comes, you will have a choice to make. You can watch it on a screen from the safety of this mountain, or you can be there. He looked at me, and I felt that intense, analytical gaze, as if he were trying to solve a complex equation. He took your voice in that ballroom, Dante said, his voice low. He tried to silence you. I'm merely offering you the opportunity to take it back. The night of the Physicians' Benevolence Award, the air was electric with a different kind of tension. This wasn't the cloying, social anxiety of a gala. This was the sharp, metallic tang of a battle about to be joined. I had chosen to be there. The decision had not been easy. A part of me, the part that had been afraid for so long, wanted to stay hidden in the mountain sanctuary. Leo's surgery was scheduled for 2 days after the awards. He was stable. He was safe. Why risk anything? But Dante's words had echoed in my mind. He took your voice. Julian had not just lied about Leo. He had tried to erase my reality, to define me to the world as a hysterical, broken thing. Hiding felt like letting him win. Dante had sent a dress. It was not the soft, apologetic pastels Julian had always chosen for me. It was a deep, midnight blue silk that felt like water against my skin. It was simple, unadorned, and elegant. When I put on, I felt armored. Dante himself was a silent presence beside me as we entered the grand hall. He did not hold my arm in a possessive grip as Julian would have. He walked slightly behind me, a silent, formidable shadow. His presence was a statement more powerful than any words. The whispers started instantly. I could hear them, a rustling wave of shock and speculation that followed us through the room. Is that Alara Kovacs with Dante Moretti? I thought he never came to these things. Look at her. She doesn't even look upset. Thorne was right. A complete gold digger. I don't know. Moretti looks protective. Serafina Thorne was the first to confront us. Her perfume, a sharp, aggressive floral, arrived before she did. Well, she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. Look what the cat dragged in. I'm surprised you have the nerve to show your face, Alara. And with him, she said the word him, as if Dante were something foul she had stepped in. Dante did not react. He was utterly still. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. Serafina, I said, my voice calm. I had practiced this. I had rehearsed it with the sound of the mountain wind as my only audience. It's good to see you two. Her gasp was satisfying. She had expected tears or shame. She was not prepared for composure. My brother is a saint for what he put up with, she spat. And for you to abandon him for this thug, it's disgusting. Before I could respond, Dante spoke. His voice was so quiet, I almost missed it. But Serafina, standing closer to him, heard it perfectly. You should choose your next words very carefully, Miss Thorne, he murmured. Some stains, they do not wash out. It wasn't a threat. It was a weather forecast. The calm before a hurricane. Serafina paled. I could hear the tiny, sharp intake of her breath. She looked from my placid face to the utter stillness of the man beside me. And for the first time, she seemed to realize she was out of her depth. She turned and fled without another word. She has her brother's foolishness, but none of his polish, Dante observed dispassionately. He guided me toward a table at the front, a table that was clearly reserved for the guest of honor. For Julian, the audacity of it was breathtaking. We sat. The tension in the room was a palpable thing now. We were an island in a sea of whispers. Then Julian arrived. I heard his confident stride, the way the crowd parted for him. He was basking in the attention, playing the role of the beloved hero. He stopped dead when he saw us at his table. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his voice tight. We were just saving you a seat, I said, offering a small, serene smile in the direction of his voice. Dante said nothing. He simply looked at Julian. I could not see the look, but I could feel the effect of it. The temperature dropped again. Julian, who had been about to explode, seemed to shrink. Alara, we need to talk, he said, trying to regain control. This has gone far enough. I agree, I said. He was forced to sit at the same table, a prisoner at his own celebration. The meal was an exercise in exquisite tension. Julian tried to engage in conversation with the people on either side of him, but his attention and the attention of the entire room was fixed on the silent man and the blind woman who sat at the center of his table like a judgment. Finally, the speeches began. The chairman of the board praised Julian's tireless work, his compassion, his generosity. Julian soaked it in, his confidence returning with every superlative. He was on a stage now. He was safe. He stood up to accept his award, a heavy crystal sculpture. He held it up to the applause. Thank you, he began, his voice thick with false humility. Thank you. I am humbled. But we all know that the work we do is not about awards. It's about people. He paused, and his eyes found me. I could feel his gaze, even from across the room. It has been a difficult time for me, recently, he said, his voice taking on a sad, pained tone. As some of you know, I was betrayed, in the most personal way, by someone I tried to help, someone I loved. The room was deathly quiet. He was doing it again, painting me as the villain, himself as the victim. It has taught me a valuable lesson, he continued, his voice ringing with sincerity, that sometimes the deepest sickness is not in the heart, but in the mind. And it is a tragedy that even the best medicine cannot cure. He was calling me crazy, in front of everyone. Again, my hands clenched into fists under the table. This was it. This was the moment. I stood up. A collective gasp went through the room. Julian, I said, my voice shaking but clear. It carried in the silence. You are right. The sickness is not in the heart. He stared at me, his face a mask of shock and fury. But it's not in the mind, either, I continued, taking a step away from the table toward the stage. It's in the lies. It's in the secrets. Alara, sit down, he hissed. You are making a fool of yourself. Am I? I asked, turning my face to the audience, to the sea of unseen eyes. Or am I finally telling the truth? This man, this saint, told me for months that he would save my dying brother, but only if I was obedient, only if I gave him everything. He held my brother's life for ransom. And when I finally broke and begged him in public, he called me a liar and a lunatic to save his own perfect image. She's hysterical. Serafina shrieked from her table. Security. But before any security could move, Dante Moretti stood up. He didn't say a word. He just stood. And in that room, his silent, formidable presence was enough to stop everything. He walked to the stage, not with aggression, but with a slow, deliberate purpose. He took a small remote from his pocket. Dr. Thorne is a man of science, Dante said, his voice calm and conversational, yet it carried to every corner of the hall. He values evidence. So, I thought it appropriate to bring some. He pressed a button. The massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying the logo of the Benevolence Award, flickered to life. The first thing that appeared was a bank statement, an offshore account. Arrows highlighted a series of deposits from the Thorne Foundation's research fund and a series of withdrawals to a known bookmaker in Macau. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then, the screen went black, and a voice filled the room. Julian's voice. "Of course I'm not going to pay for the surgery," his recorded voice sneered. It was from a phone call he must have made, thinking he was safe. "Are you insane? The kid's a ticking clock." But she doesn't know that. As long as she thinks I'm his only hope, she'll do anything I say. Anything. It's the perfect leash. The room was silent. Utterly, profoundly silent. The only sound was Julian Thorne's world crumbling to dust. Dante pressed the button again. An audio file. This one was Julian and his sister. "She's so pathetic," Serafina's recorded voice laughed, crying about her little brother. "Does she really think you love her?" "Love her," Julian's voice, dripping with contempt. "She's a blind charity case. She's an accessory. A tragic, beautiful story I can tell at dinner parties. That's all." I stood there, on the edge of the stage, as my private humiliation was laid bare for the world to hear. But it wasn't humiliating anymore. It was vindicating. The truth, in all its ugly glory, was finally out. The screens lit up one last time. It was a video, security footage from Julian's own office. It showed him with a young nurse, a girl I knew had been fired for supposedly stealing medication. His hands were on her, and she was clearly trying to get away. A woman in the audience gasped. A man swore. The facade was not just cracked. It was obliterated. Julian Thorne stood on the stage, his face the color of ash. The crystal award slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. He looked at me. His eyes were no longer full of arrogance or pity. They were full of pure, unadulterated hatred. And for the first time, I was not afraid of it. I turned my back on him. I walked off the stage, my cane tapping a steady, even rhythm. Not the frantic tap of a girl running away, but the confident beat of a woman walking toward her future. Dante was waiting for me. He held out his hand. I took it. His touch was warm and solid, a rock in the swirling sea of chaos. Together, we walked out of the ballroom, leaving the shattered remains of Julian Thorne's life behind us. The whispers that followed us now were not of suspicion, but of awe. We didn't say a word. We didn't need to. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath I had taken in a year that did not taste of fear. I was free. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Julian Thorne was a pariah. The hospital board fired him. The medical association revoked his license. The district attorney opened an investigation into his financial and personal misconduct. His world had not just collapsed. It had been systematically dismantled and burned. I heard all of this from a distance, a vague noise from a world I no longer inhabited. My world had shrunk to the size of a hospital room on the side of a mountain. Leo's surgery was a success. The words, spoken by Dr. Ramirez, were the most beautiful I had ever heard. I had sat in the waiting area for 8 hours, Dante a silent, solid presence in the chair beside me. He did not offer platitudes or false comfort. He simply sat, his stillness a strange anchor in the storm of my anxiety. He read a book, or pretended to. I listened to the faint whisper of pages turning, a steady, rhythmic sound that kept me grounded. When the doctor gave us the news, I had burst into tears, and Dante had done a surprising thing. He had placed a hand on my shoulder, a simple, grounding touch. He didn't pull me into a hug or murmur comforting words. He just rested his hand there, a silent acknowledgement, a shared victory. Now, 2 weeks later, Leo was not just alive. He was thriving. The pale, fragile boy was gone. In his place was a child with rosy cheeks and a mischievous laugh that echoed in the clean mountain air. He was asking questions about everything, his bright, curious mind finally free from the fog of his illness. I was sitting by his bed, reading to him from a braille book when the door opened. It was Dante. Leo, who had come to adore the quiet, tall man who brought him intricate wooden puzzles, beamed. "Dante," he yelled, "did you bring the thing with the secret compartment?" "Perhaps," Dante said, and I could hear the rare, ghost of a smile in his voice. "If you can beat me at chess first." Dante had spent time with Leo every day. He never spoke down to him. He treated him with a solemn respect that the boy responded to instantly. He was teaching him chess, and from what I could hear, Leo was a surprisingly adept student. "Ilera," Dante said, his tone shifting back to its usual quiet neutrality. "May I have a word?" I excused myself, leaving Leo to set up the chessboard. Dante led me out onto the private balcony of the suite. The wind was cold, but not unpleasant. We stood in silence for a few moments, listening to the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. "He is well," Dante stated. "Yes," I said, my heart full. "Thanks to you. The debt is paid," he said. It wasn't a question. I turned to face him, my hand resting on the cool metal of the railing. "Was there ever a debt?" "In my world, there is always a debt," he said. "But this was not yours to pay. It was Thorne's, and he has paid it." I shivered, though I wasn't cold. "What you did to him, it was total." "It was efficient," he corrected. "He was a cancer. I removed him. The body will heal." He spoke of society as if it were a living organism he was charged with maintaining. It was a terrifying glimpse into his worldview. "And now?" I asked, the question hanging between us. "What happens now?" "Leo is almost ready to be discharged. We can't stay here forever. You can stay as long as you wish," he said. "This place is yours for as long as you need it." "That's not what I mean," I said, my voice soft. "I can't live on your charity, Dante. I can't be another one of your assets." He was silent for a long time. The hawk cried out again, closer this time. "When I first saw you," he said, his voice a low murmur, almost lost in the wind, "in that ballroom, you were like a ghost. You were there, but you were not. You were disappearing. Thorne was erasing you, bit by bit." I wrapped my arms around myself, the memory a sudden chill. "I did not intervene to save you," he continued, and the words were a strange kind of blow. "I do not save people, Ilera. I am not a hero. I am a pragmatist. I saw a rare and valuable thing, your strength, your loyalty, being squandered. It offended my sense of order. So this was all just housekeeping." I asked, a bitter edge to my voice. "At first," he admitted, "but then things became inefficient." I could hear the faint, self-deprecating humor in his tone. "You are a complication I did not anticipate," he said. "You do not react the way you are supposed to. You do not fear what you should. You looked at me, a man everyone in this city is terrified of, and you did not flinch. You just listened." He took a step closer. "I am not Julian Thorne. I will not offer you a gilded cage and call it love. I will not use your brother or your gratitude as a leash." He fell silent. The tension was a living thing between us. "What are you offering, Dante?" I whispered. "A choice," he said. "A real one. I have arranged for a house for you and your brother, near the best schools. I have set up a trust that will see to his every need forever. You will never have to worry about money again. You are free. You can walk away from me right now, and I will not stop you. You will never hear from me again, unless you wish it." The offer was staggering. Complete freedom. Everything I had ever dreamed of. "And the other choice?" I asked, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. "The other choice," he said, his voice rough with an emotion I had never heard from him before, is that you stay. Not as my ward, not as my debt, not as my charity case. He reached out and gently touched my cheek. His fingers were warm, his touch surprisingly hesitant. Stay, he whispered, as my partner, as my equal, as the only person in the world who is not afraid of the silence, as the only person who can see me. Tears welled in my eyes. He was offering me everything, with no strings attached. But the choice with the strings, it was the one that made my soul sing. Because they weren't the strings of a puppet master. They were the ties of a lifeline, thrown from one solitary island to another. I had spent my life navigating the world through sound, through touch, through intuition. I had learned to trust what I felt, not what people said. And what I felt from this man, this dangerous, complicated, terrifying man, was a truth so profound it resonated in my bones. He did not want to own me. He wanted to know me. I'm not a complication, Dante, I said, my voice steady. I raised my hand and covered his, pressing it more firmly against my cheek. I am a choice, just like you. A month passed. Then two. The world Dante had built for us was quiet and safe. We lived in a beautiful house with a garden that smelled of lavender and roses. Leo was enrolled in a school for gifted children, his laughter filling the halls that had been silent for so long. The trust Dante had established was an invisible, benevolent shield, protecting us from the harsh realities of the world. I did not see Dante. He had kept his word. He had given me freedom, absolute and complete. He had vanished from my life as quietly as he had entered it. There were no calls, no messages, no silent black cars appearing at the end of my street. The silence he left behind was louder than his presence had ever been. I found myself listening for his quiet footsteps, for the low rumble of his voice. The house was safe, but it felt empty. The freedom he had given me felt like a different kind of cage, one of my own making. He had given me a choice, and I had been too afraid to make it. I had been so used to being a victim of circumstance, of other people's wills, that the sheer weight of my own agency was paralyzing. One afternoon, Leo came home from school, his face alight with excitement. He was holding a small, exquisitely carved wooden knight, a chess piece. Where did you get that? I asked, running my fingers over the smooth, detailed lines. A man was waiting outside school, Leo said. A really big man. He didn't say anything. He just gave me this and a note for you. Marco. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took the folded piece of paper from Leo's hand. It was thick, expensive stock. There was no writing on it. It was blank. But I knew. It wasn't a message. It was a question. It was a reminder of a choice I had yet to make. That evening, after Leo was asleep, I sat by the window, the blank piece of paper in my hand. Dante had offered me a world without him, a world of safety and peace. And it was a good world. But it wasn't my world. My world, I had come to realize, was one of sharp contrasts, of light and shadow, of silence and meaning. My world had Dante Moretti in it. He thought he had given me a choice between a cage and freedom. But he was wrong. He had given me a choice between two different kinds of freedom, the freedom of solitude and the freedom of partnership. I had spent my life being cared for, being a burden, being an obligation. First by my parents, then by Julian. Even Dante, in his own way, had taken care of me. But this time, I would not be the one being cared for. This time, I would be the one who chose. The next day, I called a car. I gave the driver an address I had memorized from a long-ago news report, an address that wasn't supposed to exist. The headquarters of Moretti Enterprises, a sleek, black tower of glass and steel that was said to be as impenetrable as its owner. I walked into the lobby, my cane tapping on the marble floor. The air was cool and smelled of leather and success. A receptionist with a polite, dismissive voice tried to stop me. May I help you? Do you have an appointment? My name is Alara Kovacs, I said. Please tell Dante Moretti that I am here. I did not say Mr. Moretti. I said Dante. The receptionist's polite mask faltered. She spoke in her headset, her voice a hushed, urgent whisper. A moment later, Marco was there, the silent mountain of a man. He did not speak. He simply nodded and gestured for me to follow him. We rode an elevator in silence. It was not the same one from the gala, but the feeling was the same. A quiet, upward rush into the heart of power. The doors opened directly into an office. It was vast. I could tell from the echo, from the way the air moved. One wall I knew would be glass, overlooking the city. Dante was there. I could feel him. He was standing by the window, his back to me. Marco closed the door, leaving us alone. The silence stretched. It was the same heavy, weighted silence from our first meeting. But this time I was not afraid of it. I was a part of it. I walked toward him, my steps sure and steady. I stopped a few feet behind him. "You gave me a blank piece of paper," I said. "It was a question," he replied, his voice a low rumble. He did not turn around. "I know," I said. "You want to know if I was happy with the world you built for me." "Are you?" he asked. "It's a very safe world," I said. "It's quiet. It's peaceful." I took another step closer. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his suit. "But it's not mine," I said, "because you're not in it." He turned around, slowly. "That was a choice, Alara," he said, his voice rough. "Safety, or me. You cannot have both." "That's where you're wrong," I said. I smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached my soul. "I've never been safe, Dante. Not really. I've just been protected. There's a difference." I closed the last bit of distance between us. I reached out, my hand finding the rough texture of his suit jacket, his chest. I could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my palm. It was not the heart of a saint. It was the heart of a man. "I don't want your protection," I said, tilting my face up to where I knew his would be. "I don't want your charity. I don't want your debt." I paused, my thumb brushing over the fabric, over the bead of his heart. "I want your partnership," I whispered. "I want the stone at the bottom of the lake. I want the quiet. I want the complication." He was utterly still. I could feel the tension in him, the coiled stillness of a man who was used to being in complete control and who was, for the first time, surrendering a piece of it. He raised his hand and covered mine, his fingers lacing with mine against his chest. "The world is a dangerous place, Alara," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer hide. "I know," I said, "and I can't see the monsters." I leaned in, my lips brushing his cheek, then finding the corner of his mouth. "So I'll just have to hold hands with the biggest one." His breath hitched, and then he lowered his head, and his lips met mine. It was not a kiss of passion, not of hunger. It was a kiss of recognition, a quiet, profound, and absolute acceptance. A final transaction in which two solitary souls agreed to a merger, not of assets, but of selves. In the end, everyone had feared the cold, untouchable stare of Dante Moretti, but I had never seen it. I had only ever heard his voice. I had only ever felt his stillness. And so, I was the only one who had ever known that the most feared man in the city was, in fact, just a man waiting in the quiet for someone to finally see him. And I was the only one who had been brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to smile back at the darkness and find a home there.